Hello, welcome to this new episode of Far From Home, a talk with a friend abroad. We are traveling all the Atlantic Ocean today, and we have Michelle, South African living in the US. Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Viviana. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again. So I will start with the first question, that is actually if you can tell us a little bit of your story and how you ended up in the US.
Sure. So I am from South Africa. As you mentioned, I was born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I immigrated to the US about 4.5 years ago. I was pretty lucky in the sense that I won a green card in the diversity visa lottery program. And for those of you that don't know, it's a US-based government program where you are eligible to win a US permanent resident card. And it certainly wasn't something I was planning, but it happened and I was given this opportunity, and I thought that it would be unwise of me not to take advantage of that opportunity, travel to the US and just see what comes of it. So that was 4.5 years ago. I have a cousin who lives in Orlando, Florida, which is where I live, which was the reason why I moved to Orlando, Florida. She and her family have been in the US for years. So I kind of reached out, and she and her family, were a fantastic support structure for me when I first moved over, just so I can pretty much start my life all over again, and moved in with them. And shortly thereafter, started to build my life pretty much all over again. And what I did is I am an attorney in South Africa. So I owned and operated a law practice, a general litigation legal practice in South Africa. And when I moved over to the US, I realized that my first difficulty was I was not going to be able to practice law unless I pretty much went back to law school, did the LSAT, took my 4-year or 3-year JD program, and then took the Florida bar. When I transcribed my qualifications, they were essentially the equivalent of an undergraduate degree. So that was a bit of a hard pill to swallow, thinking, I've got to go and do this all over again if that's something that I want to do. So I was a little indecisive as to which way to go. However, I was fortunate enough to get a job as a paralegal at a law firm not too far from where I live, and I worked there for a short period of time. And it was really great because I met some awesome people and kind of got into the American way of doing things, and it was crazy, but it was fun. And I still to this day have great friendships that developed from my paralegal work at that particular law firm. And what happened after that, I decided to go a different route. And I'm alone here in the US in the sense that my immediate family are still in South Africa. And the plan was, and still is, to hopefully bring them over to the US so we can, live together and move forward on that basis. So I decided to meet up with a business brokerage company as a prospective buyer to see if I could potentially buy a business with my family and use that as a vehicle to get them eligible to get visas to relocate to the US. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of foreigners out there, and I'll tell you how I work with them in a bit, who, use the buying a business to make them eligible to live and work in the US. Mm-hmm. So I met up with my now CEO of a company called Transworld Business Advisors, which is where I work now, as a prospective buyer. And I was so overwhelmed with, what business to buy, where to buy. I just did nothing. And he said to me, shortly after we met, why don't you just join the company as a business broker? Stay in the Central Florida area. There's huge, potential for growth from a residential, commercial, and business perspective. You can work as a broker, and worst case scenario, you'll see firsthand what businesses there are available to buy. And if you see something you like, take advantage of it. So he gave me a great opportunity to join their team, which I did. And I've been there for about 2.5 years, if I'm not mistaken. And as I say, I essentially help, business owners either from the sell side or the buy side to either find a great opportunity for a business acquisition or sell their business and then move on to whatever it is that they want to do in their life. And it's been pretty exciting because every day is a different day. And the other thing I did during this time was I came across a little side business of mine that I have going on, which is pretty cool as well. I met a beautiful soul down in Fort Lauderdale, who's a great friend of mine. And I met her through another beautiful soul down in Fort Lauderdale, who's another great friend of mine. And she introduced me to a company called Arbonne, which is essentially a health and wellness company. And I joined her team and am building my own Arbonne team as an independent consultant with this particular company. And as I say, it's all health and wellness, you know, multi-level marketing company, or network marketing company rather, and just, you know, helping people, you know, build their businesses and healthy living from the inside out. So I have an Arbonne business that I work on, which is pretty fun, and I work as a business broker for Transworld Business Advisors. And that's kind of in a nutshell where I came from and how I transitioned from the legal background to the paralegal situation to the business brokerage, and now working as a consultant for this health and wellness company.
I think that's extremely interesting. And I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
One, I think it's just a comment, because this like green card, sometimes people think that it is not true, but it's actually, it is true, and it is happening to some people.
They do. Everyone's like, what did you win? They always think I won some cash amount. And I'm like, I won the green card lottery, which is the permanent resident card, which is crazy. And it does exist. And it's like I said, it wasn't where I was planning my life to go at all. In fact, when I was selected for the green card lottery, which I think happened back in 2013, I also thought it was a joke. I was like, okay, sure, thanks. We'll see what comes of it. And then obviously, you know, I took the necessary steps to get to where I am today, and obviously made the move to the US. And initially I was a little hesitant because it's a crazy move to make. Immigration is certainly not something for the faint-hearted, especially when it's not even on your plan.
Yes.
And, you know, I had a very established practice back in South Africa. I was, for the first time in a long time, kind of happy with the way things were going with my life. And now I had to kind of change it up all over again. Yeah. But as I say, I thought if I don't do that, then it would not be a wise decision, because if you don't try, you'll never know. And I've been to a naturalization ceremony before here in the US, and it's extremely emotional, because it's so difficult what immigrants go through to get, you know, that citizenship and be able to, you know, live and work in the US and build opportunities in this country that sometimes we don't have from where we're at. So it's very real. It happens. It happened to me.
Yes, I think that like your story is really interesting. And then I have a question, and it is because sometimes when people move abroad, they think that like language is enough. So in your case, you were coming from South Africa, so English speaking country. I know in South Africa there are how many, like more than 10 languages?
11 languages, and English is obviously our primary language.
Yes. So moving to the US, another like English speaking country, language was enough, or there was some like cultural adaptation that you have to make?
That's a great question. So you would think you're moving to an English speaking country, you're educated, you can speak the language, and honestly, I felt like a fish out of water. To today, I still feel that way, although I feel so much more at home these days. I love this country. But when I moved over, the language, there were a lot of challenges, obviously, that come along with immigration. I mean, the language is definitely the most important thing, communicating, not being able to express yourself, not being able to be understood or even to understand others. And obviously there's the accent situation, which was so frustrating initially, because nobody could understand what you were saying or what you wanted. And now I love it. I mean, I have fun with it with my friends, because I sound crazy, they sound crazy, and it just is what it is. But you know, communication is definitely key, and it takes a while to kind of bridge that gap and adapt to a country that you're in, to try and make yourself more understood and to understand them and to fit more into their culture and their way of doing things. Because at the end of the day, this is where I want to be. So you need to adapt, and you need to make the change to make it easier for yourself, so you can build that life that you want, and which is the reason for which you immigrated in the first place. So besides the language as well, so many different challenges. I mean, the food, the weather, the culture, the sport, you name it. But it's an adventure nonetheless. So yes, communication and language was definitely pretty interesting for me. And it made me think of my grandfather, who immigrated from Lebanon to South Africa years ago. And with all due respect to him, he was uneducated and he could not speak English. And he got on a boat that took him to where he probably thought was Australia or America, and happened to be Africa, and built a life for himself and his family. And he did it without even speaking English. So I often thought of him when I moved over to the US and said, Michelle, you can speak English, you're educated, you know, you'll be okay.
Yes, I think that is a great point also. And another question is, because you told us a little bit about your story. So
Hmm.
professionally, do you think that like things were easier? So this also like changing job or job mobility in the US compared to South Africa, or that was more your attitude of like being open to change jobs and
Yeah,
take
so definitely, yeah, it's definitely, my attitude was definitely being open to change. I mean, I would have done anything and I would do, and you know, there is so much more opportunity, I feel personally in this country. And whilst it was difficult for me to make career changes or let go of what I was used to doing back in South Africa, it definitely was easier to do it in a country like this because there is more opportunity. And I think if you're open to change, you're open-minded, you're willing to apply yourself, you know, work a little bit smart, work a little bit hard, I think you can definitely reap the rewards of your efforts if you're persistent and consistent. So it was difficult to make the change, but I think anything is possible. And if there's opportunity for things to get done and for you to pretty much do whatever it is that you feel you can do and want to do, this is a great place to do it, in my opinion, because there is so much opportunity.
Mhm. So it's still the land of opportunity.
I believe so. I mean, I think maybe the American dream is not as apparent as it was decades ago. And I'm speaking in my personal opinion, but I believe that it's still there. You
Mhm.
just maybe need to look a little bit harder and maybe work a little bit harder, look a little bit harder as well, but it's still there. And I think you can do so much with what you have because of the resources available to you. It
Mhm.
just depends on your mindset and your attitude.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is really extremely important, and yeah, maybe more in the US, but I think like working hard and your attitude and your mindset is something
Mm.
that also we have seen through all our talks.
Mhm.
There is something that it's not, things are never easy probably, and in some countries maybe are even more difficult, but this is, if you work hard, if you try to like change your mindset and also
Mm.
your attitude, maybe that they will happen, or they will happen like faster, or at least you are trying to make them happen.
Exactly, exactly. And there's nothing that makes anybody different from somebody else, in my opinion. We're all the same, and you know, we all have the same resources. It's what you do with what's given to you and how you apply yourself. So it really is up to you at the end of the day. And it's hard. I mean, we struggle with it every day, myself included, but it's something that, you know, you need to work on constantly to get to wherever it is that you want to be based on whatever your goal is.
Yes. So then COVID came, and how was for you? So because yeah, this talk is far from home, but we had some
Mm.
far from home talk that they were closer. You were really like far from home. So how was for you to be like professional,
Well,
personally?
yeah, so COVID was a little crazy and we're still dealing with everything. So a couple of things. So the effect of COVID, obviously there were professional problems, there were personal problems, and let's kind of break it up. You know, socially and economically, I sell businesses with Transport Business Advisors, as I mentioned, and you know, small businesses kind of came to a halt because of the lockdown, which had a huge effect, obviously, on our buyers, on our sellers, and on small businesses in general. So March was a little bit crazy. However, since then, things have slowly started to pick up, and we're definitely in a better place now. Thankfully, the government obviously, you know, assisted with disaster relief funding and PPP and all that kind of stuff, which was fantastic for our small businesses who make up a huge portion of our population. So the businesses were definitely affected. We did kind of, you know, struggle to get through maybe March and April. Um, However, I think we're definitely in a better place now than where we were. I think it's all about adapting to change, you know, whether it's the business owners themselves or the brokers or just everybody in general, and trying to figure out, well, things have changed. How are we going to change the way we live our lives and the manner in which we run our businesses in order to be able to weather that storm and be okay at the end of the day? So definitely a little scary initially, but I think we've kind of managed to pull out of it from a business perspective, and hopefully, you know, as the third and fourth quarter of this year approaches and into next year, we'll get back to some kind of a new normal, because I don't think things will ever really go back to what they were for some time now, given everything that's gone on. So that's kind of the business side of it, and then personally, I mean, I've always been literally, you know, far from home, so I'm pretty used to the distance and the isolation and the loneliness insofar as that goes. But I think because it was a global struggle, everybody felt it so much more. because everybody was going through the exact same thing and felt loneliness and isolation and, being far from your family, your friends, your colleagues, whoever it was. So I think same story there, being able to adapt and finding new ways to connect with people in your life, whether it's virtually or over the phone, family, friends, colleagues, so that we don't feel that alone. I think that's very important. I mean, anxiety and depression are huge, especially these days, and isolation and loneliness, I think, can kill a person. I felt so much of that when I first immigrated to the US, so I know what it's like to feel that way. And I think a lot of what we went through and are still going through, just internationally, given the pandemic, is, it speaks volumes. So we need to make an effort to reach out to people and share the way that we feel so that we can feel better, help us and help others while doing so. So somebody once said to me that success is defined by your ability to accept change and go with it, because if things are changing, you have to change the way you live and work so that you can feel better and conquer at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so COVID was interesting, and we're still struggling, but hopefully it won't be too bad, and we can come out on top at some point.
Exactly. Yes, hopefully. But it's also true what you said, because like we started this talk with this idea. So it's normal if you feel that you are like sad and lonely, and you feel like there is all this uncertainty, and you feel like depressed because you are far from home. But at the same time, like distance was also not so important during COVID, because it's also people that were close, they were separated because of the lockdown.
Exactly.
So it was like a global pandemic affecting everyone, and the distance was not an issue anymore because everyone was the kind of isolated, or even maybe they were closer. But and this was also like the idea of this talk. Also, like you can feel normal, you can also feel maybe more connected, and it's good to share what we are going through. That there's nothing bad. And even to help the debate about like mental well-being of expat. And there is a lot about like mental well-being at the workplace or mental well-being, but still few on mental well-being of people living abroad. And as you said, sometimes can be difficult when you move and you are alone, and how to cope and deal with everything.
Exactly.
Yes. And so I think you already mentioned a little bit, but what were your resources? What you found? I think adaptation was something that you already mentioned. So.
Yeah, adaptation, definitely just adapting to change, kind of embracing it and figuring out new ways to do stuff, whether it's your routine at work or your routine at home, or like simple stuff, a workout routine, the manner in which you go grocery shopping, just changing the way in which you live your life to adapt to the changes that were happening and are happening globally, and connections, just making sure that you reach out to, whether it's friends and family or colleagues, and figuring out new ways to manage your workday so that you can maintain your productivity and stay sane, pretty much, and be consistent in what you do from day to day.
Yes, I think that is also a great suggestion, especially for this time. I have another question. It was actually the question I was supposed to ask you before, because during COVID, actually, I met a lot of South African. I had a lot of like Zoom meeting or calls with South Africa. So I'm kind of discovering South Africa. I've never been to South Africa, but I studied something about South Africa. So, and I would like to ask, so the diversity of South Africa, there is something that you can find also like the same diversity in the US, or it is a different diversity, a different also way of managing the diversity, like two different stories, two different countries, but this diversity around you was for you, there was any different or anything that you thought, oh, this could be good for South Africa, or this thing that we do in South Africa could be good for the US?
So I think I can kind of answer that question based on where in the US I'm living, but I don't know if I know that much about the US in general to answer that question. So let's speak about South Africa first. So South Africa is very diverse in the sense that it's very multicultural. So many different people from so many different nationalities and backgrounds that live there, all born and raised South African, but as I say, different nationalities. So very multicultural society, a melting pot to an extent. And I mean, it was even colloquially referred to as the Rainbow Nation at one point in time because it was so diverse. And it is pretty cool coming from a country like that because there's so many different backgrounds and peoples and languages and cultures and accents and food and you name it. So I'm kind of used to that upbringing, and moving over to the US, particularly moving over to Florida, Central Florida, is also pretty transient and has a mix of people from all sorts of backgrounds. There's lots of foreigners that live here in the US from places like Latin America or South America, Central America, and even from the UK and Europe in general. I've met so many different people from so many different places and backgrounds, foreigners, and so many different Americans who have relocated from other states in the US that live here. So same story insofar as that goes, lots of diversity, culturally, food and language and music and you name it. So there is similarities in that way, that it's diverse and it's different and whatever, but still very different to South Africa, strangely enough. But I do embrace and I do enjoy the diversity, specifically for somebody like me who's also an immigrant. And in that specific, I would think to Florida. I have not yet traveled to many states outside of Florida. I've done a couple of trips here and there, but nothing to the point where I can, comment on how diverse other states are insofar as that goes in comparison to Florida or in comparison to South Africa for that matter. But definitely diversity, which I embrace, I enjoy. It keeps life interesting and fun, and it just adds to your open-mindedness because you get to learn more about other people's upbringings and cultures and backgrounds. And there's so much, as small as the world is, it's big. There's so much more to it than sometimes, despite how far or where you've lived and traveled. And you can attest to that given your background in the countries that you've lived and worked in.
Yes. No, that's good. And also you made a good point, like, because the US are big, also South Africa is bigger. So when you have such a big country, there is also like diverse inside the country, and in the US the different states, they are like Midwest or East Coast, West Coast. So there is also like another diversity that had to the diversity.
Yeah, exactly, diversity just within each individual state, and then within the US itself. That's why it's crazy. I think you could live a lifetime in this country and not travel to every state, to see everything. So it's a lot.
Yes. So let's hope you can do it soon.
I hope so.
So we are almost at the end of our talk, and now there is like the message to your country in your languages. So feel free to send your message to the country.
Okay, let me see if I can do this. Okay, so I want to say to everybody in South Africa, Sawubona, Kunjani, South Africa. I miss you guys all so much, and ek is so lief vir jou en ek kan nie wag om julle almal weer te sien nie. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. So
thank you, Viviana.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and for sharing with us, and good luck with everything and your life in the US, but also with your family. And
thank you.
And thank you all for following. We will see for another episode next Wednesday.
Thank you so much, Viviana. Bye.
Bye-bye.